Something shifted. You might not be able to name it. You might not even be able to explain it to the people closest to you. But deep inside, in that quiet place beneath all the noise of your daily life, you know something is different. Something has changed. Not on the outside, not yet, but inside. In the way you see things. In the way certain people suddenly feel distant, even when they're standing right next to you. In the way places you used to love no longer feel like yours. In the way you wake up some mornings and feel like a stranger in a life that used to fit perfectly. If that feeling has been following you lately, I need you to stop everything right now and watch this video until the very end. Because what you are about to hear might be the most important explanation you have ever received for everything that has been happening to you. Most people will go their entire lives never understanding what you are going through right now. They will call it a phase. They will call it stress. They will tell you to sleep more, worry less, and get back to normal. But here is what they don't know. There is no going back to normal. Because the version of you that called that life normal no longer exists. You have entered a new timeline. Now before you click away, before your logical mind tries to dismiss what I just said, I want you to stay with me. Because this is not about fantasy. This is not wishful thinking. What we are going to talk about today sits at the intersection of quantum physics, Jungian psychology, neuroscience, and ancient spiritual wisdom. And by the time this video ends, you are going to understand your own life in a way that will genuinely change how you move through the world from this moment forward. Here is the surprising truth that most people are never told. A timeline shift does not announce itself. It does not come with a dramatic moment, a lightning bolt, or a sudden revelation. It comes quietly, almost invisibly. It sneaks into your life through the back door while you are busy grieving what you lost, confused about where you are going, and wondering why everything that used to make sense suddenly doesn't anymore. The shift has already happened. Most people just don't recognize it until years later when they look back and finally see the fistfully invisible line they crossed without ever realizing it. But you are watching this video, and that means something. Think about the last 6 to 12 months of your life. Really think about it. Have certain friendships started to fade without any real argument or reason? Have you felt a strange pull away from things you used to love? Have you had moments where you looked in the mirror and felt like you were looking at someone you are still getting to know? Have you felt simultaneously exhausted and more alive than ever before? Have you noticed that your old dreams no longer excite you, but you can feel something new forming just beneath the surface? Something you cannot quite name yet. These are not signs that something is wrong with you. These are signs that something is profoundly right. These are the 7 quiet signals that your soul has already stepped into a new chapter, a new frequency, a new version of your life that your conscious mind is only beginning to catch up with. In this video, we are going to walk through all 7 signs together. And I promise you, by the time we reach the final sign, something inside you is going to click. Something that has been confusing you, haunting you, or silently breaking your heart is going to finally make sense. Not because I have all the answers, but because somewhere inside you, you already do. You just need someone to help you hear what your own soul has been whispering. We are also going to go somewhere that most videos on this topic refuse to go. We are going to talk about the shadow side of this shift. The part that feels less like awakening and more like falling apart. Because nobody tells you that entering a new timeline can feel like grief. It can feel like depression. It can feel like losing your identity, your relationships, and your sense of purpose all at once. And if you are in that place right now, if you are in the dark middle of something you cannot explain, I need you to hear this clearly. You are not broken. You are not lost. You are in the most sacred and terrifying part of the process. And everything you are feeling has a name, a purpose, and a destination. Stay with me through this entire video. Because the section that comes toward the end, the one about the people and the connections and the opportunities that are already moving toward you on this new timeline, that section alone is worth every minute of your time today. There is a version of your life that is waiting for you just on the other side of understanding what is happening to you right now. A version that feels lighter, more aligned, more real. A version where the right people find you, where your gifts finally make sense, where the pain you have been carrying starts to transform into the most powerful story you have ever lived. You did not find this video by accident. That is the first thing you need to understand. In a world of endless content and infinite distractions, something guided you here. And if you have learned anything about the way the universe works, you already know that nothing that feels this specific, this personal, this perfectly timed, happens by coincidence. So take a breath, get comfortable, and let's begin. Let's talk about something that most people completely misunderstand. When people hear the words timeline shift, they immediately think of science fiction. They picture alternate universes, time travel, or some kind of mystical experience reserved for the spiritually elite. And because of that, they dismiss the entire concept before they ever give themselves the chance to understand what is actually happening to them. But here is what I need you to know. The idea of shifting timelines is not a fantasy. It is not a metaphor, and it is absolutely not crazy. In quantum physics, there is a principle called the observer effect. It states that the simple act of observing something changes it. Scientists have proven, in controlled laboratory conditions, that particles behave differently depending on whether or not they are being watched. What this tells us, at the deepest level, is that reality is not fixed. It is not a solid, unchanging structure that you are simply moving through. Reality is fluid. It responds to consciousness. It responds to you. Now take that principle and bring it into your personal life. Every single day, you are making thousands of micro decisions. You are choosing what to believe about yourself. You are choosing what kind of love you will accept. You are choosing which version of your future feels possible and which ones you quietly give up on. And over time, those choices accumulate. They build. They compound. Until one day, without any dramatic announcement, they tip you across an invisible threshold into an entirely different experience of being alive. That is what a timeline shift is. It is the moment your accumulated inner changes finally break through into your outer reality. Carl Jung called this the process of individuation, the lifelong psychological journey of becoming who you were always meant to be. He believed that the human psyche is constantly moving toward wholeness, toward integration, and that the most profound transformations in a person's life are rarely chosen consciously. They are initiated by something deeper, something Jung called the self with a capital S, the part of you that knows your destiny even when your ego is completely lost. Modern neuroscience supports this too. Researchers have found that the brain is neuroplastic, meaning it is constantly rewiring itself based on your experiences, thoughts, and emotional patterns. When a person undergoes a significant inner transformation, the neural pathways in their brain literally restructure. The things that used to trigger you stop having power. The people who used to feel essential start to feel misaligned. The dreams you used to chase start to feel hollow. And new desires, new instincts, new visions begin to rise from somewhere you cannot fully explain. This is not a malfunction. This is evolution happening in real time inside your nervous system. Here is the fact that most people find truly unsettling when they first hear it. Research in psychology suggests that we do not have one fixed identity throughout our lives. We have multiple selves. And the transition from one self to the next is almost always uncomfortable, disorienting, and deeply lonely. Because you are no longer who you were, but you have not yet fully become who you are going to be. You are living in the in-between. And the in-between is one of the most psychologically challenging places a human being can inhabit. If you are there right now, if you feel suspended between two versions of yourself, with no clear ground beneath your feet, then what I am about to share with you across the next sections of this video is going to feel like someone finally turning on the lights in a room you have been navigating in the dark. Because the 7 signs we are going to walk through are not just spiritual concepts. They are psychological, neurological, and deeply human experiences that millions of people are going through right now without any framework to understand them. And without that framework, the most beautiful transformation of your life can feel like the conscience, the most terrifying breakdown you have ever experienced. So now that you understand what a timeline shift actually is, grounded in both science and the deeper wisdom of the soul, let me ask you something. What if everything that has been falling apart around you was never supposed to hold? What if the collapse itself was the first sign? Because that is exactly where we are going next. And what I am about to tell you about the destruction that precedes every real transformation is going to completely change the way you see your pain. Nobody prepares you for this part. Nobody sits you down and tells you that before the new version of your life can arrive, the old one has to be completely and sometimes brutally dismantled. We celebrate the breakthrough. We share the glow-up. We post the transformation. But the messy, disorienting, heartbreaking collapse that made all of it possible, that part gets left out of the story. And because it gets left out, millions of people are sitting in the middle of their greatest transformation right now, believing that they are failing. You are not failing. You are falling forward. Think about the most powerful transformations in nature. A caterpillar does not gently and gracefully evolve into a butterfly. Inside that cocoon, the caterpillar's body completely dissolves. It liquefies. Every structure it had, every familiar form, breaks down into something that looks like nothing recognizable. And only from that total dissolution does the new form emerge. Scientists who have cut open cocoons at the wrong moment have found not a half-formed butterfly, not a transitioning caterpillar, but a liquid, pure potential, completely unrecognizable. That is what you are when you are in the collapse before a timeline shift. You are not broken. You are dissolved into pure potential. And the reason it feels so terrifying is because everything your identity was built around is being deconstructed at the same time. Psychologists call this a liminal period. The word liminal comes from the Latin word limen, meaning threshold. It describes the psychological space between who you were and who you are becoming. Anthropologists first used this term to describe ritual initiation ceremonies in ancient ceremonies, where a person was symbolically stripped of their old identity before being reborn into their new one. What is fascinating, and what most people never realize, is that every human being goes through multiple liminal periods in a lifetime, and every single one of them follows the same pattern. First comes the separation from the old. Then comes the confusion of the middle. Then comes the emergence of the new. The problem in modern life is that we have no rituals for this. We have no elders who look at us in our darkest moments and say, "This is supposed to feel like this. You are right on time." Instead, we have a world that tells us to push through, stay productive, keep performing, and never let anyone see you dissolving. So we pathologize our transformation. We call it depression. We call it a crisis. We medicate the very symptoms that are trying to initiate us into our next level. Now here is where it gets even more psychologically profound. Research by Dr. Bruce Lipton in the field of epigenetics shows that trauma, loss, and intense emotional disruption can actually trigger genetic expression changes. Meaning the collapse you are going through is not just emotional or spiritual, it is biological. Your body is literally rewiring itself at the cellular level during periods of profound, personal transformation. The relationships that end before a timeline shift are not accidents. The jobs that fall apart are not failures. The habits that suddenly lose their grip on you are not weaknesses disappearing. They are the universe's way of clearing the frequency, of removing everything that belongs to the old timeline, so that your hands are empty enough to receive what is coming on the new one. But here is the thing nobody talks about. The collapse does not just take what was bad, it takes what was comfortable. It takes what was familiar. Sometimes it takes people you genuinely loved and situations that brought you real joy. And that is the part that makes this phase feel indistinguishable from pure loss. Because you are grieving. And the grief is real. What you lost mattered. But grief and growth can exist at the same time. And the fact that you are still here, still watching, still seeking understanding, means that something inside you already knows that this pain has a purpose. So hold on to that knowing. Because in just a moment we are going to move into the first two signs that your soul has already crossed the threshold. And the first sign is going to stop you in your tracks, because it describes something that has probably been happening to you for months that you have not had the language to explain. Have you noticed that people are disappearing from your life? Not dramatically, not with big arguments or explosive endings, just quietly, gradually, like a tide pulling back from the shore. People you have known for years suddenly feel like strangers. Conversations that used to flow easily now feel forced and hollow. You find yourself canceling plans without guilt, sitting in silence instead of reaching for your phone, preferring your own company in a way that surprises even you. This is sign number 1, and it is one of the most misunderstood experiences a person can have. Most people experiencing this start to worry. They wonder if they are becoming antisocial. They wonder if something is wrong with them emotionally. They wonder if they are depressed or disconnected or simply becoming someone who is difficult to love. But the truth is the exact opposite of all of that. What is happening is a profound and necessary energetic recalibration. Here is the psychology behind it. As your inner world shifts, your vibrational frequency, for lack of a better word, changes. And the relationships in your life that were built on your old frequency begin to feel misaligned. Not because those people are bad, not because you are better than them, but because you are no longer operating on the same level of consciousness, the same priorities, the same emotional needs. It is like tuning a radio. When you move the dial, the old station does not disappear. You just can no longer hear it clearly. Research in social psychology confirms this pattern. Studies on personal transformation show that significant identity shifts are almost always accompanied by social network restructuring. In plain terms, when you change deeply, your friendships change too. The people who are connected to who you were cannot always follow you into who you are becoming. And trying to force those connections to survive the transition creates a kind of psychological dissonance that drains you of the exact energy you need for your growth. Sign number 2 walks hand in hand with the first. And it is even more personal. Because it is not just about the people leaving. It is about the desires disappearing. Things you used to want with every fiber of your being suddenly feel meaningless. Goals you spent years chasing feel hollow. Achievements that once defined your self-worth no longer move you. And in their place, there is something new forming. Something quieter but far more powerful. A pull towards something you cannot fully name yet. A longing that feels ancient and familiar at the same time. Psychologist Abraham Maslow described this as the shift from deficiency needs to being needs. The move away from wanting to fill a void and toward wanting to express your fullest self. It is one of the rarest psychological transitions a human being can make, and it happens quietly, almost invisibly, until one day you realize that the life you were desperately trying to build no longer fits the person you have become. If you have been feeling this way, if the things that used to drive you have gone strangely quiet, do not panic. Do not try to reignite the old fire, because what is coming next is not a smaller version of what you wanted before. It is something entirely different, something that was not even visible from where you used to stand. And speaking of things that were not visible before, the next 2 signs are going to take us into the most intimate territory of all, your inner world. Because the most dramatic changes happening to you right now are not the ones anyone else can see. They are the ones happening in the deepest chambers of your mind. Close your eyes for a moment and think about your dreams lately. Not your waking ambitions, your actual dreams. The ones that visit you at night. Have they been more vivid than usual? More symbolic? More emotionally intense? Have you been waking up at strange hours with a feeling you cannot shake? A feeling that something in the dream was trying to tell you something important, but you cannot quite translate it into words. This is sign number 3, and it is one of the most fascinating intersections of neuroscience and spiritual awakening that exists. Carl Jung devoted much of his life's work to the study of dreams. He believed that dreams were not random neurological noise, but direct communications from the unconscious mind. He called the unconscious the storehouse of everything the conscious mind has not yet processed, integrated, or understood. And during a timeline shift, when your entire identity is restructuring, the unconscious becomes extraordinarily active. It floods your dreamscape with symbols, archetypes, and emotional scenarios that are trying to help you integrate the changes happening beneath the surface. Modern sleep researchers have found something remarkable that aligns with Jung's theories. During periods of intense psychological change, the brain spends significantly more time in REM sleep, the dreaming state. It is as if the brain knows that the conscious waking hours are not enough to process the magnitude of what is shifting. So it uses the night to do the deeper work. You might be dreaming of water, which in Jungian psychology represents the unconscious mind itself. You might be dreaming of houses with rooms you have never entered before, symbolizing unexplored aspects of your own psyche. You might be dreaming of death, which almost never means literal death, but consistently represents the end of an old identity. You might be dreaming of flying, of crossing bridges, of being in unfamiliar landscapes that it somehow feel more like home than anywhere you have ever been in waking life. Pay attention. Your dreams right now are not just dreams. They are your psyche's navigation system, actively recalibrating to a new frequency. Sign number 4 is perhaps the most quietly powerful of all the early signs, and it is this. Your intuition has become undeniable. There is a voice inside you that has gotten louder, a knowing that arrives before the logic does, a gut feeling that has been right so many times recently that you can no longer explain it away as coincidence. You walk into rooms and feel the energy before anyone speaks. You think of someone and they contact you within hours. You get a strong feeling about a decision, and when you ignore it, you immediately regret it. When you follow it, something opens up that you could not have planned for. Neuroscientists at institutions like the HeartMath Institute have discovered that the heart has its own neural network, sometimes called the heart brain, containing over 40,000 neurons that process information independently of the brain in your skull. This system is extraordinarily sensitive to patterns, frequencies, and information that your conscious logical mind has not yet registered. What we call intuition is not mystical guesswork. It is this deeper intelligence system processing reality at a speed and depth that your rational mind simply cannot match. During a timeline shift, this system becomes hyperactive because your soul is navigating unfamiliar territory and your logical mind has no map for where you are going. So your intuition steps forward. It becomes your compass, and the more you trust it, the stronger it gets, the more aligned your path becomes. The danger is that we live in a world that trains us to distrust this voice. We are taught to think more, analyze more, seek more external validation. And so some people reach this stage of the shift and mistake their sharpened intuition for anxiety. They try to quiet the voice instead of learning its language. Do not make that mistake, because that voice is not warning you that something is wrong. It is guiding you towards something that is more right than anything you have ever known. But here is where the timeline shift starts to get deeply disorienting. Because the next sign, sign number 5, involves your relationship with something so fundamental, so built into the fabric of your daily existence, that when it starts to change, it can make you feel like you are losing your grip on reality itself. I am talking about time. And what has been happening to your experience of it lately is not something you should ignore. Have you been losing track of time in strange ways? Hours disappearing without explanation. Days blurring into each other. Moments that feel like they stretch impossibly long, while entire weeks seem to vanish. Overnight, you sit down to do something and look up to find that 3 hours have passed and you cannot account for any of it. Or the opposite. You feel like you have been awake and moving for what feels like days, and you look at the clock and only minutes have gone by. This is sign number 5, and it is one of the most psychologically and spiritually significant indicators of a timeline shift. It is also one of the most frightening if you do not understand what is causing it. Let me start with the science, because the science here is genuinely extraordinary. Neuroscientist David Eagleman, one of the world's leading researchers on time perception, has spent years studying how the brain constructs the experience of time. And what he has found is both groundbreaking and deeply relevant to what you are going through. The brain does not have a single clock. It does not experience time as a fixed, objective measurement. Instead, it constructs the experience of time based on the density of new information being processed and the emotional intensity of a given moment. When you are in a routine, when your brain is not being asked to process much that is new, time seems to accelerate. The days blur together because your brain is running on autopilot, using stored patterns instead of actively engaging. But when you are in a period of intense psychological transformation, when your brain is processing enormous amounts of new emotional, psychological, and perceptual information all at once, time begins to distort. It stretches, compresses, and behaves in ways that feel almost supernatural. This is exactly what happens during a timeline shift. Your brain is doing the most complex rewiring it has ever done. Every belief system you had about yourself and the world is being examined and reclassified. Every emotional pattern is being restructured. Every neural pathway associated with your old identity is being either reinforced with new meaning or quietly dissolved. And all of this neurological construction work requires an extraordinary amount of cognitive resources, which is also why you have been feeling so profoundly tired lately, even when you are not doing anything that should be exhausting. But here is the spiritual dimension of this sign that sits alongside the neuroscience. Many ancient traditions describe what they call sacred time or deep time, a state of consciousness where the normal linear flow of past, present, and future begins to dissolve. The Hopi people of North America have a word, koyaniskatsi, which describes life out of balance, life in a state of disintegrating and reforming. Spiritual teachers across every tradition, from Buddhism to Sufism to the mystical branches of Christianity, have described moments in the transformative journey where the initiate begins to lose their normal sense of time as part of the process of releasing attachment to the past and to the future, and becoming rooted in an entirely different experience of the present. When your soul moves into a new timeline, your relationship with linear time naturally begins to shift, because you are no longer fully aligned with the old narrative. The old sequence of past experiences leading to a predictable future no longer holds. And without that narrative anchor, time stops behaving the way you are used to. Here is the practical reality of this sign. You may have been finding it nearly impossible to make plans with confidence. The future feels strangely unscripted in a way that is both exciting and terrifying. The past feels oddly distant, like it happened to a different person. And the present moment, when you are truly in it, has started to feel more real and more vivid than anything you have experienced in years. That vividness, that strange electric quality in certain quiet moments, that is not your imagination. That is your consciousness beginning to fully inhabit the new timeline. That is your soul landing. And just when you start to feel like you might be finding your footing on this strange new ground, the universe does something that will either confirm everything you have been feeling or completely unravel what little certainty you had left. It starts leaving you signs everywhere. And the way it does it will make you question everything you thought you knew about coincidence. You see the numbers 1111 on the clock, and you look away. Then you see it again the next day, and the day after. You think about someone you have not spoken to in years, and within hours they send you a message. A song comes on the radio that speaks directly to the exact question you were silently asking in your mind 5 minutes ago. You make a decision, and the very next day, something happens that confirms it was right in a way that logic cannot explain. A stranger says something to you in passing that contains exactly the answer you had been searching for. You start to wonder, is this real? Am I creating these connections in my mind? Or is something actually trying to communicate with me? This is sign number 6, and it is the universe's most elegant and undeniable confirmation that you have crossed into a new timeline. Carl Jung gave this phenomenon a name in 1952. He called it synchronicity, and he defined it as a meaningful coincidence between an outer event and an inner psychological state that cannot be explained by conventional cause and effect. Jung did not believe synchronicities were random. He believed they were communications from the deeper layers of reality, moments where the inner world and the outer world perfectly and unmistakably mirror each other. Jung documented hundreds of synchronicities in his own life and in the lives of his patients. He found that they occurred most frequently during periods of intense psychological transformation, during the exact kind of inner shift we have been describing throughout this entire video. His conclusion was profound. Synchronicities are not accidents. They are the universe's way of confirming that you are in alignment with your deeper path. Modern physics has begun to catch up with what Jung intuitively understood. The concept of quantum entanglement shows us that particles that have interacted with each other remain connected across any distance, responding to each other instantaneously in ways that defy classical physics. Some theoretical physicists and consciousness researchers, including the late Nobel laureate Roger Penrose, have proposed that human consciousness itself may be rooted in quantum processes, that our minds may be entangled with the fabric of reality in ways that science is only beginning to map. What this suggests is extraordinary, that the synchronicities you are experiencing are not your mind playing tricks on you. They may be evidence of a genuine and profound connection between your consciousness and the structure of reality itself. Here is how to work with this sign rather than just wonder at it. Start keeping a synchronicity journal. Every time something happens that feels too specific to be coincidence, write it down. Write down what you were thinking or feeling in the moments before it happened. Write down what question you were sitting with. Write down what decision you were trying to make. Over time, a pattern will emerge that is impossible to deny. And that pattern is your new timeline communicating with you. It is the map of where you are being led. But I want to prepare you for something. Because as the synchronicities intensify, as the universe becomes more and more insistent with its signs, you are going to arrive at the final sign of your timeline shift. And it is the one that people are least prepared for. It is the most beautiful sign of all. But it is also the one that will bring you to your knees before it sets you free. Because the seventh sign is not about the world around you changing. It is about you, the you that you have always known yourself to be. And what is happening to that version of you right now is something that every wisdom tradition in human history has described. But nothing, absolutely nothing, can fully prepare you for the moment it arrives. Who are you? Not your name, not your job, not the roles you play for the people who depend on you, not the story you have been telling yourself and others for years about where you came from and where you are going. Who are you underneath all of that? When the titles are removed and the relationships are stripped away and the achievements and the failures and the identity markers are all set aside, what is left? If that question makes you uncomfortable, if it produces a silence inside you that feels both vast and slightly terrifying, then you are already living inside sign number 7, the most profound, the most disorienting, and the most sacred sign of all. You no longer fully recognize yourself. And I need you to hear this clearly, because the way this sign shows up is so deeply unsettling that most people immediately interpret it as a crisis. They run to therapists, to doctors, to friends, desperately trying to find the old version of themselves, trying to get back to who they were before. But here is the truth that changes everything. The old self is not lost. It has been outgrown. And you cannot go back to an identity that your soul has already transcended any more than you can return to being the child you once were. Psychology has a term for this experience. It is called ego dissolution. And it is one of the most documented and cross-culturally universal experiences in all of human raw psychology. Every major spiritual tradition in history has described it. The Christian mystics called it the dark night of the soul. Buddhism calls it anatta, the experience of no fixed self. Indigenous initiation ceremonies around the world were specifically designed to induce it. Sufi mystics described it as fana, the annihilation of the self before reunion with the divine. Carl Jung described it as the death of the persona, the false self constructed for social survival, before the emergence of the authentic self. Researchers who study transformative experiences, including those at Johns Hopkins University studying mystical states of consciousness, have found that ego dissolution is consistently associated with some of the most profound and lasting positive psychological changes a human being can undergo. Increases in openness, reductions in fear of death, dramatic increases in compassion and empathy, a fundamental reordering of values away from the external and toward the deeply internal. But in the moment, in the raw, unmediated experience of it, it feels like losing your mind. You look at old photographs and feel like you are looking at a stranger. You read journal entries from a year ago and cannot believe you were that person. You sit with old friends and feel a gap between you that no amount of effort can bridge. You try to explain how you have changed and the words don't come, because the change is not conceptual. It is not a shift in opinion or a change in preference. It is a fundamental alteration in the architecture of who you experience yourself to be, and in the silence left by the old identity, before the new one has fully formed, there is a period of profound emptiness. And that emptiness is not nothing. It is everything. It is the space in which the truest, most undefended, most powerful version of you is slowly taking shape. Here is what I want you to hold on to as we move into the next part of this video. The caterpillar does not grieve for its wings while it is dissolving. It cannot imagine what it is becoming. But the transformation does not require its understanding. It only requires its surrender. You do not need to understand everything that is happening to you right now. You do not need to be able to explain it. You do not need anyone else to validate it. What you need is the one thing that the next section of this video is going to help you find. Because there is a shadow side to everything we have discussed. A part of this process that can derail your transformation completely if you don't know it is coming. And almost nobody talks about it. Until now. Here is something that might be the most important thing I say in this entire video. Everything we have talked about so far, the quiet disappearances, the shifting desires, the vivid dreams, the sharpened intuition, the distorted time, the synchronicities, and the dissolution of your old identity, every single one of these signs can be misdiagnosed by you, by the people around you, even by professionals who don't understand what a genuine psychological and spiritual transformation actually looks like from the inside. Because from the outside, a timeline shift looks almost identical to a breakdown. The isolation looks like depression. The loss of old desires looks like loss of motivation. The distorted sense of time looks like dissociation. The ego dissolution looks like an identity crisis. The dreams and the synchronicities look like magical thinking. And the deep fatigue that comes with rewiring your entire nervous system looks like burnout or chronic illness. This is the shadow side of the timeline shift, and it is where most people either get lost permanently or make the wrong turns that send them back to the old timeline instead of forward into the new one. Carl Jung spent decades mapping the shadow. He defined it not as evil, but as everything within the psyche that the conscious mind refuses to acknowledge. The unexpressed grief, the buried anger, the unfaced fears, the disowned dreams, the parts of yourself you were taught to hide, suppress, or be ashamed of. Jung's central thesis was this: you do not become whole by eliminating your shadow. You become whole by integrating it. By turning to face what you have been running from and discovering that the very things you feared most about yourself are the source of your greatest power. During a timeline shift, the shadow becomes extremely active because the walls that were keeping it contained, the routines, the relationships, the roles, the identity structures are all dissolving. And as they dissolve, everything that was stored behind them begins to surface. Old wounds that you thought were healed reopen. Old fears that you thought you had moved past return with new intensity. Old versions of yourself that you thought you had left behind show up and demand to be seen. This is not regression. This is integration. The shadow is not trying to destroy your transformation. It is asking to be included in it. Because you cannot build a truly new life on a foundation that still contains unprocessed pain. The new timeline you are entering cannot hold your full potential if you are dragging unacknowledged wounds into it. Here is the practical truth. If you are in this shadow phase right now, if the process of shifting timelines feels more like drowning than awakening, there are specific things you need to do. Write everything down, every fear, every resentment, every old wound that is surfacing. Not to analyze it, not to fix it, just to give it form. to bring it from the darkness of the unconscious into the light of your awareness. Because what is named can be known, and what is known can be transformed. Stop performing wellness. Stop pretending that you have it together for the benefit of other people's comfort. The shadow feeds on secrecy and silence. The moment you speak your truth honestly, even just to yourself in a journal, you begin to drain its power over you. And most importantly, find the meaning in what is surfacing. Every wound that is coming up right now is coming up because it is ready to be healed at a depth it could not have been healed before. Your new timeline cannot be built on suppressed pain. It is being built, right now, out of the integration of everything you have survived. You are not in a breakdown. You are in the most demanding, most rewarding construction project of your entire life. And just when the work feels heaviest, just when the shadow feels most overwhelming, something extraordinary begins to happen, because the next thing we are going to talk about is what starts to appear when you do this work. What starts to move toward you? Who starts to arrive? And when you hear it, when you truly let yourself believe that it is already in motion, the weight you have been carrying is going to feel different. Not gone, but purposeful. And that makes all the difference. I want you to think about a magnet for a moment, not as a metaphor, as a literal physical reality. A magnet does not chase the metal it attracts. It does not strategize or perform or exhaust itself in pursuit. It simply becomes what it is, fully, completely, without apology. And everything that is aligned with its frequency moves toward it naturally, inevitably, as though there was never any other possibility. This is what happens to you after a timeline shift. You stop being a chaser. You become a magnet. And here is what starts moving toward you. The people who arrive after a timeline shift are fundamentally different from the people who populated your old timeline. They are not attracted to your performance. They are not held in place by your people-pleasing. They are not drawn by your willingness to shrink or your habit of overgiving. They are drawn by the frequency of who you are actually becoming. The raw, undefended, fully inhabited version of you that is emerging from everything you have been through. Psychologists who study post-traumatic growth, a phenomenon documented extensively by researchers Tedeschi and Calhoun at the University of North Carolina, have found something remarkable. People who undergo genuine and profound personal transformation following periods of intense difficulty consistently report that the relationships that form in the aftermath of their transformation are categorically different in quality from those that came before. Deeper, more honest, more reciprocal, less performance-based, less conditional, and characterized by a quality of recognition that many describe as being truly seen for the first time. These new connections are what many spiritual traditions call soul contracts. Agreements made at a level deeper than the conscious mind between souls who are meant to meet at a specific moment in each other's journeys. You were not ready for these people before, and they were not ready for you. The timeline shift was the preparation, the collapse, the shadow work, the identity dissolution. All of it was clearing the frequency so that these connections could find you. But it is not just people. It is opportunities that align with who you actually are, rather than who you were performing to. B. Doors that open, not because you forced them, but because you are now vibrating at the frequency of 4. What is on the other side of them? Creativity that returns with a power and an originality it never had before. A sense of purpose that is not borrowed from someone else's definition of success, but emerging from the deepest core of your own authentic nature. The research on post-traumatic growth also reveals something extraordinary about the physical body during this phase. Studies have shown that as psychological integration deepens, as the shadow is brought into consciousness and the new identity begins to stabilize, the body's inflammatory responses decrease, immune function improves, and neurochemical markers associated with well-being begin to normalize. Healing is not just spiritual and psychological, it is biological. Your cells respond to your transformation. And here is the invitation that this phase of the journey offers you. You do not need to rush this. You do not need to force the new connections or manufacture the new opportunities. Your only work right now is to stay aligned with the truth of who you are becoming, to keep doing the integration work, to keep showing up honestly, to trust the process even on the days when it is invisible, because the new timeline is not somewhere you are trying to get to. It is something you are already standing in. The people, the opportunities, the version of your life that feels aligned and alive and genuinely yours. They are not waiting for you in some distant future. They are being drawn to you right now, in this moment, as you become more yourself than you have ever been before. And that brings us to the most important thing I could possibly say to you. The thing that ties every sign, every shadow, every synchronicity, every dissolution, every beautiful, terrifying, magnificent moment of this journey together into one single truth. You made it here, and I need you to understand something about that. In a world designed to fragment your attention, in a world that throws 1,000 distractions at you every single hour, you stayed, you watched, you listened, and that is not a small thing. That is evidence of exactly what we have been talking about this entire time. Something in you recognized this. Something in you knew this was for you. That is your soul, navigating. That is your intuition, working. That is your new timeline, confirming itself. So let me speak directly to you now, not to an audience. To you, you have been through something. Maybe you cannot fully name it yet. Maybe the people in your life still do not understand why you seem different, why you have pulled back, why the old you seems harder and harder to find. But you know, somewhere beneath all the confusion and the exhaustion and the grief and the wonder, you know that what has been happening to you is not a crisis. It is a calling. It is not a breakdown. It is the most precise and purposeful restructuring your soul has ever undergone. Everything that fell apart was supposed to. Everyone who left created space for someone more aligned to arrive. Every moment of disorienting silence was your psyche doing the deepest work it has ever done. Every synchronicity was real. Every dream was a message. Every time you felt like a stranger in your own life, you were not losing yourself. You were finally finding yourself. The real one. The one that was always there beneath the performance and the people-pleasing and the survival patterns and the borrowed identity. Here is the final truth I want to leave with you. And I want you to carry this one with you long after this video ends. The most powerful thing about a timeline shift is not where it takes you. It is who it reveals you to be. Because the new timeline does not create a new you. It uncovers the you that was always there, waiting patiently beneath every version of yourself you constructed to survive. The shift does not give you a better life. It gives you back to yourself. And from that place, from the ground of your true self, you build something that no circumstance, no person, and no collapse can ever take from you again. That is your foundation now. That is what all of this was for. So here is your challenge. Not tomorrow, right now. In the comments below this video, I want you to write one word, just one word that describes where you are in this journey right now. Awakening, dissolving, emerging, healing, lost, found, beginning. Whatever word rises first from your gut, that is the one. Write it, because the act of naming where you are is the first step of consciously choosing where you go next. And you might also find, when you look at the comments, that you are far less alone in this than you ever imagined. If this video reached something in you, if it gave language to something you have been carrying without words, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. You never know whose timeline you might help shift simply by passing this along. And if you want to go deeper, if you want to keep exploring the psychology of awakening, shadow work, and the hidden mechanics of personal transformation, subscribe and stay close. Because everything we are building here is for people exactly like you. People who are brave enough to dissolve, wise enough to trust the process, and powerful enough to become what they were always meant to be. You did not land here by accident. You never do.